And the idea of taking over is to bankrupt the whole world where nothing is of any value and the currency does not exist anywhere, and then come back and solve all the problems.
Well, listen up! There is a storm coming! Like nothing you have ever seen! And not a one of you is prepared for it!
There's no more secrets, just ignorance.
Exactly.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the 401 show, everyone.
This is episode 22, and we are going to finish Banking in the Book of Revelation. This is part 2, and we're going to jump right into it. So let's get started.
The people behind the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, it's called the Federal Reserve Bank, but it's not a federal. It's not federal. It's actually privately owned. Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
Majority stockholder are the Rothschilds. There are 300 other people, mostly of European descent, that actually own this bank. They are not Americans. Some of them are, but even if they are Americans, their first allegiance isn't to the United States or the flag. It is to their hidden government, because it's about to go, it's starting to go public. All right, we're going to do a little exercise here, because we're going to show you in a very simplified way, and someone with a sheet of paper and a calculator, this could come in pretty handy. So we're going to create a civilization called Utopia. The utopian, let's just call it, it's the country of Utopia, okay?
Okay.
Countries don't start like this. This is a simplified example, and we're going to throw in a few assumptions to simplify it. This utopian little new nation has 1,000 people on it, okay? 1,000 people plus me. I'm the banker, or I'm gonna want to be the banker. We are not going to get into inflation. We are not going to worry about population growth. We're going to assume that all 1,000 people actually earn money, okay? So there's no like kids or elderly. All right, we're simplifying this. Okay. We are not going to talk about how the central bank deals with other commercial banks like Bank of America or Chase. We're only going to talk about how they deal with the U.S. government, the U.S. Treasury Department, which is a government institution. We're not going to get into fractional reserve banking. Do you guys know what that is?
No.
Fractional reserve banking, we'll save it for later.
Okay.
But it merely accelerates what I'm about to show you by a factor of essentially times 10. Fractional reserve banking, again, this is all getting away from a dollar used to have a piece of gold backing it somewhere.
And before we got on this paper or fiat currency system, the backing of the money that was used was in the very metal that the money was made of, whether coins were made of gold or silver. And that's what the Federal Reserve Bank and these banking families have been getting the world away from for some time now. And we're going to show you the devastating impact of that and the power that comes with providing the currency of a nation.
Then banks, if they're going to take your deposits, they had to be able to give out if everyone ran to run on a bank was supposed to be able to pay everyone back if they needed to have all of it.
Yeah.
But they got away from that, and they went to what's called a fractional reserve system, meaning they only need to keep a fraction of what's on deposit actually in their bank.
Mm-hmm.
So when the central bank gets money to Bank of America then only has to really keep 10% of it. So if they get $1 million, they can loan out $900,000, which they loan to other banks. Then those other banks take $810,000, they loan it out. Then the next round of banks, $700, and there's several degrees, but $1 in circulation can actually come to almost $8 or $9 in debt. I'm going to show you why that's such a problem. Okay, any questions so far?
Nope.
Okay. So as part of this story, we're going to say that this regal, well-praised wise man, he approached me. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is not too far from what happened with the Rothschild family maybe 400 years ago.
And that when the Rothschilds, back in about the 17th century or so, the gods started living in the Rothschilds. They had chose them as the purest family in the occult belief. And through the Rothschilds, making them gods, not mortals, not witches, but gods themselves, they created the Illuminati. Now, if you look at the pyramids, the capstone is free from the pyramid because the capstone is the Rothschilds, and they do not consider them human. They consider them gods. And the eye is the father god, Lucifer.
This wise man approached me and says, if I show you how to take over your country peacefully and ensure it survives and thrives as a free democratic society for ages to come, would you want to hear more? I mean, would you want to hear more?
I guess who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't? If I teach you ancient mysteries to advance your people's health and technology beyond your wildest dreams, would you follow me? Would you start to have some faith in me? If I bring wealth to your nation and secure the fortunes and status of your family for generations to come, would you be loyal to me? How many people do you think Satan has to ask that of before he gets a yes? Probably not very many. I mean, I would have taken this deal 10 years ago.
Did everybody hear that question? Okay. He wants me to explain the Council of 13. Reach in your billfold and take out a $1 bill real quick. We'll settle the whole thing. I'll let you ask your federal government later how this got on the $1 bill. On the back of the $1 bill, you'll see the crest with the pyramid in it. The capstone above. The eye is Lucifer. The triangle of the capstone is the tribunal of the Rothschild family, which is called the Holy Family. They lead the Illuminati.
They are not considered humans by the occult world. They're considered gods. They believe that gods, sons and daughters of Lucifer, dwell in these human bodies. And when the humans die, the Rothschilds die, they go into the next Rothschild born. And they're not to be treated as men, they're to be treated as gods. And believe me, they are treated as gods. Their word is absolute law.
And they, in turn, direct to the top block of that pyramid. And that top block is the Council of 13 of the Grand Druid Council, which I was a member of. Now, the Druid system of government is not that the politicians run everything. It is the same system that Rome had. The priests let whoever wants to rule the government, but the priest must rule the ruler. And part of my authority was whatever governors, senators, or political people were in my area took direct political orders from me, which I in turn did not think of, but simply translated to them from the orders that we got from London, from the Rothschild family. They are the voice. The doctrine of the occult teaches that Lucifer comes and sits at their dining room table. When they see the table, they leave 13 chairs out, and the 13th one is for Lucifer to sit in himself. They set him a plate and everything. Now, I've been there in the mansion, and I've seen this go on. The best way is to find out who belongs to the CFR or who belongs to the CFR.
That's the Rothschilds. They created, they founded the Illuminati. Many people can't understand why a family of Rothschilds 200 years ago, it's actually 3 because they existed 100 years before their birth date, would create a conspiracy for world takeover that they never hoped to see fulfilled. This may seem funny to your ideas, but when you're raised in it, it's absolute truth.
All right, so Utopia. We've got 1,000 people, has regular people in it, teachers, doctors, journalists, builders, politicians, business. It's got people working in the private sector and in the government sector. You understand?
Hairdressers.
Yep, hairdressers.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if we're a dictatorship or what kind of government we have. We'll just say we're a republic, like we were meant to be, even though we're not really a republic anymore. We're a democracy, which is a problem, but we're not going to get into that. Okay, so
Not sure what we are anymore.
Yeah, right.
all right, so a couple more numbers to keep in mind, and this is where I'm actually picking you, Charles, to be on point with the numbers. So have your calculator set to go. We got 1,000 citizens. Average annual income per citizen is about what it is in the U.S., roughly 30,000, let's say. Okay. For each citizen that's in the population, our actuarial accountants have determined we're going to need about 50,000 in circulation for each citizen. Now, I don't know if you guys have gotten this far into conspiracies, but if you go deep enough, you'll actually find out that when a social security number is created on your behalf, that entitles the U.S. government to get from the central bank a certain amount of dollars that goes into circulation as a result of you being now born.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, we're going to do the same thing, but via a backward method. So, if there's 1,000 people in the society, Charles, and we need 50,000 in circulation per person,
I thought you said 30,000.
30,000 is the average income.
Oh, okay.
We need 50,000 in circulation per person. How much money are we going to need? That 50,000 is where we're in a smooth society where you can see here the economy's flowing. It's moving. People have cash. They're buying. They're selling. They're trading. You know, it's working. So 1,000 times $50,000 each, we're looking at
50 million.
50 million. Okay. We'll get back to that 50 million number in a second. Let's also assume a couple more things we're going to need to assume in order to do this example. And if you guys have any questions about anything so far, stop me because I want to make sure this is super clear. We're going to assume that the average tax rate of a citizen of Utopia is about what it is in the U.S., about 25%. Sound reasonable?
Okay.
Give or take?
Yeah.
Some people pay 0, some 28, some more, who knows.
Yep.
But that's, for this example, is what we're going to use.
We're going to use what?
25.
25%.
Okay.
That is the tax rate, which means if the average person earns $30,000 a year, how much are they going to owe in taxes each year? Come on, baby.
25%.
What, 12,500?
Sure.
Or so, something like that? 50,000?
7,500.
Oh, for 30,000.
Because that's going to be 25%.
Of 30,000.
Right.
Or 50,000.
You take 30,000,
Oh.
their income.
You messed me up with that 30,000 and 50,000.
You're going to have to
Okay.
look, and they wanted us to be confused about this too. That's why we're going to go
Okay.
through this very carefully.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Why I don't math.
All right. So the average tax rate you're paying is 25% on what you earn, and you earn $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Basic math, you're paying $7,500 a year in taxes, right?
Yeah.
Understand?
Got it.
All good. Another way to know what the tax revenue is of our nation is if every person pays $7,500 a year in taxes and we have 1,000 people, what's our nation's tax revenue every year?
A lot.
7.5 million.
Yeah. That.
Okay. Now we're going to also need, you guys know what T-bills are? Bonds, bills, treasury notes, these terms, you've heard these terms before, yes?
Yes, I have heard those
Okay.
terms before.
So, treasury bill is like the equivalent, it's like maybe you've owned stock in a company, maybe it was your private company, or you bought IBM, or you've dabbled in cannabis stocks, or who knows what. We've probably all owned stock in something at some point or another. You get the concept. A bond or a note or a treasury bill, what I'm just going to call T-bills, this is like owning stock in a government. Now, when I own stock in IBM, that stock is, the value of it's a formula of how many assets it has. It owns property. It's got cash in the bank. It's also got cash flow, and it's got expectations for the future. And all these things come together to determine what a price is, what someone's willing to buy and sell it for on that day.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what's called the equity that's in IBM. That's the equity of the business. Sometimes a business is successful because it's just got a great location, Kentucky Fried Chicken right off the highway. Sometimes they have a patent. Sometimes they have a special customer or a contract. Many different ways to realize equity in your operation. For a government, well, what do they have? Do they really? What is
people?
That's what they've got.
Guns.
Mm-hmm. They've got people
They've
and
got
50,000 ahead in circulation for each one of them.
And so if you've ever purchased a T-bill or a government bond, or if you invested in what's considered these very safe investments, that is ultimately going to be paid for by what? By the tax revenue that is created by the work of the people.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
That is the equity with which the United States trades. It's how much we can produce as a people.
Yeah.
Okay? We all follow this so far.
Yes.
And just so you know, like, this is what a treasury note looks like. Now, this one is actually a 7 and, I can't even read that, 5/8?
7 5/8, yes.
All right, this is a treasury bond. Bonds, bills, they have different maturity dates. We're not going to worry about that. Okay, but this instrument exists. You could buy this if you wanted to. Okay, some people certainly have parts of their portfolios on this. We all understand this, right?
Okay.
Okay, you get the picture?
Yes.
Okay. We know that we've got 1,000 citizens. We know the average income is $30,000 a year. The average tax rate is 25%. So we know that the taxable, the revenue of Utopia is $7.5 million per year. You guys following me on
Yes.
this? Do you know how I arrived at that number?
Yes.
Charles, do you understand how I arrived at that?
Yeah, it's the tax revenue per 1,000 people, right?
It's 25% of all the money people earned. So if 1,000
per
people
1,000.
each earned $30,000, they earned $30 million cumulatively.
Yeah.
But 25% of it, they got to send back to their government, which is supposed to pay for roads and education and all the things that make our society supposedly.
So
That comes
7.5 million per 1,000.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay? And there's going to be no inflation, no growth. So that number is going to stay steady in this example the whole time.
Okay.
7.5 million is the annual revenue of our nation. All right? Okay, everything's starting to come together. We got 1,000 people. We're on an island. We're good. We're happy. And I'm following my wise guy's little advice. And I'm like, hey, you know what, guys? I'll set up the bank. I have a business background. And, people want to follow their passions. The nurse wants to go into nursing. The farmer wants to go into farming. And I'm like, look, dude, I'll give you loans for combines and x-ray machines, and we'll make easy credit for everyone. This is going to be a win-win. And they don't know any better. They're like, sounds good to me. Well, we need something. All right, you run the bank. I'll be the guy that prints off the currency. Now, this is the very important part. When I set up my bank, it's not owned by the U.S. government or Utopia. It's owned by me personally,
Yeah.
and my family, and my buddies, my blood, the people I am loyal to. That's going to become very important. But I don't want the people getting suspicious, so I'm going to toss a name on it with the word federal on it. But if you do look up the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, it is a privately owned bank. And this is where this is going to get pretty frickin' scary. Now, the people behind this bank, you know the names. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, Chase. These are the guys that actually print currency. Now, in today's world, it's done through keystrokes on a computer.
Yeah.
3 parts of this plan. They set up the Federal Reserve, which is a private corporation, which now gives the United States its currency. The U.S. Treasury, they have a relationship with the U.S. or Utopia's Treasury Department. The third thing that happens is the IRS. Here again, we think this is a federal agency that's, these guys work for the United States government. They do not. The Internal Revenue Service is the private collection agency of the Rothschild family and their other bloodline families. Now, by the way, I could supply 100 testimonies of people that have come out of these families that claim they worship Lucifer. And I can show you in the Bible where Jesus said the rulers of the world will control the money and will be worshiping Lucifer.
I talked on the Illuminati. I talked on the physical kingdom of the devil. But there is a spiritual kingdom, too. And without the spiritual kingdom, that physical kingdom wouldn't function. A Illuminati person believes in Lucifer, the God of light, peace, love, blah, 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 and so on.
Every man in the Council of Foreign Relations and every man in the Trilateral Council believes that Lucifer is God supreme, has declared it, has taken a vow of secrecy, and has dedicated his life.
Now, maybe it's just random coincidence, but after a while, it's hard to refute it. And the IRS is, in fact, it is private. I'm not going to get into it. You can go figure it out. And they are incorporated through a shell company. It's so effing laughable because at the end of the day, they do not have the right or authority to collect any money from us. Now, the same bird I talked about with the Romans, you can see this all through history.
Yeah.
Okay, the Nazi ideology came to the United States. You can see it's on our currency. It's all over the place. We've done other shows on currency. We're not going to get too deep into them. The Department of the Treasury, that is a government organization. Some memes like, everyone, even cavemen, knows that the bank is privately owned because that's the monkey in the wrench. Mm-hmm. That is, here's Alan Greenspan, the head of the Fed. He said the Fed is a central bank and a privately owned corporation answerable to nobody. You won't find this in the New York Times or Washington Post, because guess what? The people that own the New York Times and Washington Post and CNN and ABC and Fox and yada yada,
And Google and YouTube.
they're the same ones that own the bank.
Yeah.
Of course, you can check out who owns Standard Oil. That's David Rockefeller. He's the owner of Standard Oil. And Standard Oil is the conglomerate that owns almost everything. If I'm going to tell you the things they own, you're not going to believe what they own. It's that astonishing.
Without TV, the Illuminati would never gain control of the world. Two of the major networks in this country are completely Illuminati-owned, lock, stock, and barrel. ABC and CBS. And NBC is 90% Illuminati. Try getting a serious, Bible-believing program on TV that preaches hardcore gospel. It'll never happen.
What would you say was the number one conglomerate within the United States? Anybody, tell me. Besides Standard Oil. Sears? That's Standard Oil. General Motors, that's the one I was waiting on. Standard Oil owns General Motors. They own Ford. They own American Motors. They own Chrysler. Now, you'll see Federal Department stores down here. Federal Department stores is Sears, Kenny's.
Montgomery Ward and Noble are one company. Noble belongs to a company that owns Standard Oil, Exxon, and all of them. It's probably 40% of the money that comes to the Illuminati comes to that system of companies.
They own just about every department store in the United States. Globe, Ontario's, so on. They own Woolworths, which owns Wilco's. But Standard owns Mobil, and Mobil owns Montgomery Ward's. You getting the message? Now, you can find out what Standard owns because they mark their signs with blue and red, everything they own. They also, in all of their oil companies, mark their oil companies with occult symbols. The main symbol is the sign of their god, the five-pointed star. They have Sunoco with the arrow through it because that's the sign of casting a spell, the arrow. I don't know why Union 76 is separate, because it's a member of Standard Oil. They use 76 because May 1st, 1776 is their birth date of the Illuminati. They use the sign of what witches practice in, this magic circle. When they write Mobil, they write everything in blue, but they leave the circle in red. Most people don't even notice that there's a difference. Shell Oil was the last oil company to go when Queen Julianne, which is a member of the 500 here, and her husband, Prince Bryden, and Philip Rothschild own 90% of Shell Oil. The winged horse in Marathon, Pegasus, is the messenger of the god. It goes on and on. Holiday Inn is the star with the rainbows. And you just go on and on. Chase Manhattan Bank and Bank America are both owned by the Rockefellers. First National is owned by the Dows and the DuPonts and the Kennedys. Okay, Prudential, Chase Manhattan owns Prudential. Actually, Lloyd's of London owns most of the insurance companies in the United States. And Lloyd's of London owns Chase Manhattan, okay? So it's a chain. Allstate's owned by Sears, which is owned by Federal Department stores, okay? I mean, when you study conglomerates, you'll find out there's 4 conglomerates in the world and everything's owned by them.
Now, they don't teach this in college courses. I've got friends that are PhD in economics who were blown away when I sat down and, like, this is how this works. And they're like, oh, my God. Well, my point is, this is shielded from the population. And it's shows like ours that teach people this. All right, so it's year 1 of our nation, okay? There's a Treasury Secretary. You know, let's just say we've elected a president. We've got 1,000 people in it. We already know what the labor force is. The Treasury's been set up. The treasurer of Utopia calls. I'm the banker. I'm the central banker. I'm the only one to get money. He calls me up. He's like, hey, Dave, we need $50 million for Utopia. I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, what are you going to give me for collateral? And the treasurer says, we'll give you some government bills, some bonds, some T-bills, right? Makes sense?
Sure.
So I'm like, okay, I will print off $50 million. You print off your T-bills. We exchange. I put my money in an armored car. It goes from my central bank over to your Treasury Department. They take it out. Then the money starts to get into circulation. It starts to go into salaries and into programs, and it goes into banks that then loan it to business. You understand? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, I'm going to add 2 more parts to this deal, which the U.S. agreed to. One is the U.S. government's going to pay me actually less than what you saw a T-bill there for 7 5/8%. I'm just going to charge 5%. Right now, it's close to 0. And I'll tell you why it's close to 0, because it doesn't matter anymore. I'm going to charge the United States, if I'm going to give you $50 million, I mean, that makes sense, right? If you're going to let people use money, you charge interest on the money, right? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's this exchange. I'm the banker, and I get $50 million worth of U.S., basically stock in the United States. The U.S. gets $50 million in cash, and I'm going to earn 5% interest off of this $50 million
Yeah.
every year. Make sense?
Yep.
You guys following me so far?
Yes.
Good. I also then go set up the Internal Revenue Service because I tell the treasurer, look, don't you worry about collecting all this. Since we're putting up the money, we'll collect it. So that means the IRS, my private collection agency, is going to go out and is going to collect $7.5 million from all the people in Utopia.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep the interest that's owed to me, and then I will send the rest back to the U.S. government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Does everything sound kosher so far?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Now, at the end of the first year, how much money is in circulation? It's the day before taxes are due. How much money is in circulation in Utopia?
50 mil?
50 million.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. You understand that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. How much is owed in cash to my bank right now at the end of year one
Are we talking with interest?
with interest?
Oh, I don't know how to math that, but like the 50 million
Well, the 50 million,
plus 5% interest.
5% of,
50 million?
right, so 5% of 50 million is 2.5 million, right? So you add the 2.5 million in interest to the 50 million. So right now the utopian government personally owes me $52.5 million.
Right.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
All good?
Math, yeah.
There's a big problem already. Do you know what it is?
What?
Do you know why Utopia is fucked
Why?
right now? Because
Because-
guess what? If I were to take all the money out of circulation, all of it, they still can't pay me back, which means by design, they're meant to owe me
There's only 50,000 in fucking
forever.
there in the first place. So where do you want me to pull this 2.5 mil? I don't fucking ask. You got to print it for us for me to give it back to you. How
Now
does
we
that
go
make
back
any
to that
sense?
Pujo committee.
Yeah.
These guys were bankers. They understood this.
Yeah.
They understood. They were selling our country. Now we're going to see. I'm going to show you that how by year 46, I own this place. And remember, this is what started happening in 1913. So this did actually happen in 1913, Federal Reserve Act. Just enough people were bribed, murdered, or home for the holidays on December 23rd to get this act passed. When we send money to the IRS, we are sending it to the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, who own the central bank. The money is first applied to their interests. So they pull out their money, and then what's left over gets sent to the U.S. So once taxes are paid at the end of that first year, how much is in circulation now?
Okay, so that would essentially be what, like we're talking like that 50 mil, and if we're paying them the interest first, then we're getting, there's going to be less than 50 mil out there in the first place.
Because they're
You're
taking
better
it
at
off
math
top.
than you made it sound.
No, I understand what's going
So
on,
if
but
we've
like,
just
actually
paid
throwing
them
numbers
at
together.
the end of 1 year, we just paid them 2.5 million in interest.
So our money is disappearing,
So in circulation now we have how
but
much?
they're getting loaded off of us.
Right now Utopia is 47.5 million, not the 50 million, but
Right.
it's close enough that you can't really notice it.
No, but you can make things work, and then
can.
little teeny tiny little things start to disappear.
Now this goes on for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That means for the next 10 years I'm taking 2.5 million out, 2.5 million out.
Right.
At the end of 10 years, my private bank has pulled 25 million out of circulation. So how much is in circulation in Utopia?
Was it half?
Half of it. 25 million is what's in circulation
Yeah,
right
and
now.
now the people of Utopia are starting to feel the pinch.
They're not. The depression was a retraction of currency of just 30%. We
Okay.
just retracted at 50%.
Oh,
In the
yeah.
real world, this is revolutions. People are killing
Yeah.
each other for food.
Yeah.
This is not a realistic scenario.
Right.
The Treasury would never wait that
But-
long to reinfuse its coffers.
But I understand how this happened now. Yes.
Okay. So in year 11, we're like, hey, we got to get back to a $50 million sweet spot. So I call up the Federal Reserve Bank, Treasurer calls me up. He's like, we need another 25 million to get back to that 50 million sweet spot. And I print off 25 million. I send it over armored car. I get my Treasury bills that are still earning 5%. Okay?
It's
So at the end of the 11th year, I have now put a total of 75 million into the economy.
right.
I'm now pulling out 3.75 million of interest out of the tax base. You following me?
Yep.
So after 10 years, how much have I pulled out of the economy? We were at 50 million to start year 11, and we're now taking 3.75 million out every year. So
500
10
million?
years?
500 million?
No. After 10 years, 10 years times
37.5 million.
Thank you. Which means there's only 12.5 million in circulation. I mean,
Yeah.
a nation can't survive like that. But this is hypothetical.
Wait a minute. Is this the United States?
It is
Kidding.
essentially.
I know exactly what you're saying.
So year 20, by the end of year 20, I've been collecting 3.57 million per year for the last decade. I've
Yeah.
pulled 37.5 million out.
Yeah.
By the end of year 20, there's only 12.5 million in circulation, but 75 million is owed. Things are starting to get very unbalanced. The Treasury advises the utopian government that we need to increase the debt limit. You've probably heard these things. In order to stay liquid, Congress agrees to increase the debt ceiling to 112.5 million because we're going to have to borrow what? To get back to our sweet spot of 50 million.
Yeah.
We're going to
It's
need to borrow another 37.5.
way more than we will ever be able to get out of.
Actually, our goose is cooked by year 31.
Yeah.
Because now you see we made infusion 1 in year 1 of 50 million. In year 11, we put in 25 more million. In year 21, we put in 37.5 million. In year 31, we put in 56.5 million. I have now, quote unquote, lent the USA $169 million, and I'm now earning interest every year of 8.45 million.
Yeah.
What's our tax revenue? It's 7.5. Our tax revenue doesn't even cover the interest.
Yeah.
So have you ever heard that when we pay taxes, it's all going to interest and none of it goes to the government? Because of this.
Yeah.
We're actually completely underwater. And what happens is you start to notice we can't even wait decades anymore. We can't, from year 31, we've got to do it again in year 37. We've got to do this again in year 42.
Yeah.
And and what happens when the debt ceiling isn't raised or when the cash doesn't come out? Well, we see government shutdowns. Roads start to get messy.
So wait, when do we get to the point where we're just like, we don't like these guys anymore. We're just going to get them out of there. We don't care about what we owe them.
Well, could there be a revolution in the United? Now you're starting to ask questions. Now you understand why militias are forming. Now they won't tell you this, but half this nation is expecting a civil war over this very problem.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't a new problem. These guys have been nipping at the U.S.'s heels for long since before Abraham Lincoln. But even in Abraham Lincoln's day, he said this in 1864. He said, and this was in a letter that he wrote to a friend, William Elkin. There's some debate about whether the letter was really written or not, but it was in print in 1888. Either way you slice it. He said this, I see in the future a crisis approaching that unnerves me and causes me to tremble for the safety of my country. As a result of the war, corporations have been enthroned and an era of corruption in high places will follow, and the money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic is destroyed. I feel at this moment more anxiety for the safety of my country than ever before, even in the midst of war. He's also famous in that same letter for saying, also again 1864, Abraham Lincoln said, I have two great enemies, the Southern Army in front of me and the financial institutions in the rear. Of the two, the one in the rear is the greatest enemy.
Yeah.
The Bible actually says the way that this will get solved ultimately, it's not by human intervention. It will be divine intervention, and it will be Jesus Christ coming back to literally wipe these MFers out.
God,
and
I
that's
hope
why
so.
you better be on his team.
Yeah.
Because if you're not one of his, you're his enemy. Yes, Jesus Christ, I'm saying this.
And this is the whole problem with this and everything that is going on with you, me, and all of what is going on right now is that nobody believes it. Nobody. They're like, oh, no.
They will.
That's not real.
Before the Federal Reserve Act, we had no debt. We got out the gold standard, and look what has happened. This is the hyperbolic curve that every significant figure that has been here throughout history that understands this, they have been trying to warn us about the dangers of this system.
And the beauty of this deal is, what did I have to put up to essentially take ownership of Utopia? Or what was put up to take over the United States? The investment made was nothing more than some paper and some ink. and a printer that could print currency. That was it.
At the end of the day, these people praise Lucifer, and they do have plans to take over the world. What the back-end plan is, because they don't want just money. They want your soul. And I'm going to tell you how they do that.
No.
We'll get...
Now, Melissa, you asked, how do we stop these guys? Typically, they've been the ones to stop people from exposing them. Although that strategy seems to have changed over the last few decades, probably because their plans are so certain. But Louis T. McFadden was an example of one of these guys. He'd had a few attempts on his life via ambush, gunshots, and he ultimately died under mysterious circumstances of some intestinal flu when he was visiting New York with his family. But he said this in 1932 on the floor of Congress. He was a U.S. congressman, and he said, "When the Federal Reserve Act was passed, the people of the United States did not perceive that a world system was being set up here, and that this country was to supply financial power to an international superstate, a superstate controlled by international bankers and international industrialists acting together to enslave the world for their own pleasure." That was in 1932. I know we've heard this one before. This was a U.S. Senator, Steve Sims. Maybe you can now read between the lines on this, where he said this on the floor of Congress. This was in the Congressional Record. Few Americans fully appreciate the extent to which their tax dollars are being used to finance their own destruction. And I think you've heard this one as well. Larry McDonald, he's commenting on a work called the Rockefeller File, which basically broke down the Rockefellers' plans. Larry McDonald was very vocal also about the powers behind the Federal Reserve. Here again, he's another guy that died under strange circumstances. He was on flight KAL 007, which was shot down by the Soviets in 1983. Soviet defector Yuri Bezmenov even thought that plane was shot down on orders of the Illuminati to kill Larry McDonald. Stranger still was there was a person on that flight, a very famous person. The flight made an unscheduled stop in Anchorage, Alaska, and the person that got off that airplane was Richard M. Nixon. A few hours later, that plane would be strewn all over the Pacific Ocean. He said, "The Rockefeller File is not fiction. It is a compact, powerful, and frightening presentation of what may be the most important story of our lifetime, the drive of the Rockefellers and their allies to create a one-world government combining supercapitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control." Even David Rockefeller, the patriarch of the Rockefeller dynasty, he wrote this in his book Memoirs, the only autobiographical book by any Rockefeller ever written in history. This came out in 2002. And he wrote this: "Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic one-world structure, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it."
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. A world...
And Aaron Russo, who we're going to get into a little more deeply here in a minute, he became friends with Nicholas Rockefeller. Nicholas Rockefeller shared a lot of things with him. And we're going to get into that in a second. But one of the things that Aaron Russo came away with, because this rocked Aaron Russo's world. And Aaron Russo, here again, he's a famous movie producer. He has better things to do than to pick a fight with these international Federal Reserve bankers who tend to kill people if you stand up and talk about it. Aaron Russo, in a 2007 interview, he finally went public and he blew the whistle on everything he knew. He said that the ultimate goal these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers. He went public in January of 2007, and he would be dead by the end of that year.
Aaron Russo, the filmmaker behind Trading Places, he's getting to know the Rockefellers. 11 months before 9/11, they pull him aside. They said there's going to be this event in New York City. And ultimately, it's going to lead to us chipping the population. So Nicholas Rockefeller is saying this to his new buddy, Aaron Russo, okay? Basically saying, do you want to be in on the people that have the good chip? You can do whatever you want in this world.
I had a friend, Nick Rockefeller, okay, who was one of the Rockefeller family. And he, when I was running for governor in Nevada, he came to me, introduced himself to me through an attorney. And we became friends. We started talking about things. And one of the things that we used to talk about was the ultimate plan of the banking industry, what they wanted to accomplish. So the ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers, right? And the whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is giving me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. They can just turn off your chip, and you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people, you know? And so they want a one-world government controlled by them, everybody being chipped, all your money in those chips, and they control the chips, and they control people. And you become a slave. You become a serf to these people. That's their goal. That's their intentions.
And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
So, the Rockefellers, which would be the synagogue of Satan that Jesus talked about in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, here they are, just as predicted. They are about to introduce the mark of the beast. Mm-hmm. Now, what that is going to actually be, we don't know, and very possibly the Rockefellers themselves don't know, because Satan's no dummy. He is smarter than anybody.
The people who are running this country from behind the scenes do not care a thing about Americans or bloodshed anywhere. They are the most violent, dirtiest people on the face of the earth. Somewhere, Americans are going to have to take their country back and start finding out who are these people.
Thus, the doctrine of Satanism is a heresy, and the true and pure philosophical religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Abaddon, Jesus Christ. But Lucifer, God of light and God of good, is struggling for humanity against Abaddon, the God of darkness and evil. They're calling Jesus Abaddon. They're calling Lucifer everything we believe of Jesus, and Jesus everything we believe of the devil. And that's in one of their own books.
And look and know that the devil has got, thousands and thousands of years of experience. And unless we think with the mind of Christ, he's going to walk all over us. Your warfare is not physical, it's spiritual. And every Christian should memorize Ephesians 6:12. It's about time we stand up and start taking authority over the principalities and powers. Read Ephesians 6:12. That's what runs the area, and we need to take authority over it and stand up.
If you understand anything about Freemasonry or Masonic lodges, one of their slogans is Order ab Chao, meaning order out of chaos, which ties in with what John Todd and frankly the book of Revelation had to say, which is these people are going to bankrupt the world on purpose, and they're going to create, by design, chaos. The name we know this person by best is probably the Antichrist, and this is who's going to solve our problems.
The Illuminati owns most, I would say 99 9/10 of the stores that you walk into and shop and the gas stations you go to. And they are going to destroy them on purpose. And the idea of taking over is to bankrupt the whole world where nothing is of any value and the currency does not exist anywhere, and then come back and solve all the problems.
It's more than a loose-knit network. It is a conspiracy. The plan required the destruction of all existing governments and religions. Weissaup's revised plan required his Illuminati to do the following things to help them accomplish their purpose. 1. Use monetary and sex bribery to obtain control of people already occupying positions in high places in the various levels of all governments and other fields of human endeavor. Number 15, create industrial depression and financial panic, unemployment, hunger, shortage of food.
They are determined to win for themselves undisputed control of the wealth, natural resources, and manpower of the entire planet. They intend to turn the world into their conception of a Luciferian totalitarian socialist state. In the process, they will eliminate all Christians, Jews, and atheists.
And that's when I started getting a little afraid, because when I was 10, as I said, I learned a little about the Bible. It just happened to be all revelations that I learned. And all of a sudden, we were discussing a world ruler that would be personally guided by Lucifer, that could gain control of the world.
We're not trying to scare you. All we're trying to say is get to know Jesus Christ. He is our only way out of this. He is our only hope. Know him.
But we got good enough to understand
Oh,
this?
yeah. That's an excellent explanation, yeah.
And are we back July 11th? We'll post, you know, our Facebook.com/401 show.
Yep, we'll figure it out.
Melissa, love having you.
Fantastic show.
Charles,
thank you.
As usual, pleasure. Al.
Thanks, Al.
Smoothest sailor. I'm going to
Ever.
call you Popeye. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Okay, bye.
What I'm about to say is fact. The secret organizations of the world power elite are no longer secret. They have planned and are now leading us into a one-world communism.
ODD TV. Take a journey with me deep inside the rabbit hole. Wake up, my friends, there's some things that you have to know. Everything you ever thought you knew, it has to go. For instance, NASA is the world's largest magic show. 9/11 was a planned demolition and Sandy Hook was a scam. Come on, man, are you tripping? Constant programming being crammed in your vision. Just take a step back and examine this prison. Turn on the news and they're trying to blind you. All they ever do is tell you lies and divide you. There's nowhere you can even hide, they'll find you. Illuminati all-seeing eye right behind you. It's about time you find out we're being lied to. They're attempting to control the mind that's inside you. Hide you from the power that designed you. Does anybody have a problem with this? Well, I do. I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They say they got it.